never had before to work on this in a more interconnected way. In my talk, I can't help but have a technology slant to it. I have worked for 16 years for one of the leading information and communication technology companies. In Sweden, I don't need to tell you, it's Ericsson. And in that time, so much of what I do and my own personal thoughts around peace are so tied with what I do every day at work. And I have three main points today. I'd like to talk a bit about what we call at Ericsson the network society, and how the network society can empower a whole new society of change makers for peace. I'll also talk about technology can create a culture of engagement, of unity and community, which is also directly related to peace. And third, I'll share a few personal experiences from an area that I work with every day called Technology for Good, and what I think that we can all do as individuals in this area. But first, the network society. The network society is today. It's the world we're living in right now. I bet none of you leave your house without your smartphone every day. Your smartphone is guiding you through traffic, it's helping you conduct your business, you're using it for commerce, and perhaps most importantly, you're using it every day to be in instant contact with family and friends. But let's put this in perspective. If we look back over the last 30 to 40 years, we're experiencing a change that I would argue is greater than the entire Industrial Revolution. It took us roughly 100 years to connect 1 billion places using simple phone calling. It took us about 25 years to connect 5 billion people. And within a period of about 15 years, we will connect 50 billion devices. So the pace of change has never been faster. And what the network society means is that anything that can benefit from being connected will benefit from being connected in the future. So this scale has been transformative. It's opening up new doors and new windows, regardless of your age, your race, your gender, or your religion. And the benefits are on more equal terms than ever in the history of humankind. You have access to information anywhere you are, and this is bringing benefits not just to people and businesses, but to society as a whole. But despite the advantages of our interconnectedness, the world has never been more in conflict. We started 2015 with the terrorist attacks in France. We're seeing the advent of diabolical groups like ISIS and Boko Haram, and perhaps less known conflicts that Jan talked about, like Darfur, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic. And you could look at certain terrorist groups who start to compete for land and for territory, and they're competing with each other for recruits. And you could say, isn't this fueled in part with the very internet that we're bringing? So what's going on? We've never been more connected, yet the world is so much more divisive. With the connectivity, we hear and see more, but isn't this just providing an outlet for rogue groups to thrive? Last week I was at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and I listened to the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry talk about terrorism, and he said, we can't change minds without knowing what's in them. And this resonated with me for two reasons. First, it highlights the importance of education and educating youth. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly, what moral responsibilities we have as individuals, and in my world, representing a company, to drive the technology that we bring as a force for good in the world. This leads me to my second point. The potential and the promise is there to bring people together through the use of technology, but how can we use this to create the culture of engagement that we all want? Thanks to mobile communication, we've seen huge leaps in areas like education, healthcare, social and financial inclusion, but there are gaps and conflict still runs rampant. At the World Economic Forum, another statistic that stood out for me last week is that 66% of the world's poor live in conflict zones. This goes back to the point that Jan made about the role of development and how it's so intertwined with peace. It creates a positive spiral. When parents can feed their children, children can go to school, and the community can see a future. But it's a negative spiral when the opposite is true. So peace is not an end in and of itself, and you can't separate the two. As a citizen of the network society, we are so dependent on technology to exist for our identities, to say, here I am, and my view matters. But technology alone is not the answer. A mobile phone will not end poverty, but it will help empower people to lift themselves out of poverty, and poverty being so closely intertwined with conflict. Ericsson was founded in 1876, and one of our most basic fundamental beliefs at that time, and still through to today, is that access to communication is a basic human need. And these days, we even talk about a basic human right. Our intention is to bring communication for all, and the technology that we develop is wholly dependent on our intentions. My final point is to share a few personal experiences of technology for good and what I think we can all do as individuals. I've been working for the last couple of years with the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative. Shortly, you will hear Forrest talk about that project in more detail. But the experience I have had is in helping him to build a youth peacemaker network. We're working in South Sudan and Uganda with former child soldiers, but also in places like Mexico, helping to keep youth out of drug trafficking and gangs. And soon we'll be bringing that to different ethnic conflicts in Myanmar. And in that project, we have provided the youth in the project who come from all different regions, different cultures, and different ethnic tribes with mobile phones and computers so that they can be in contact with each other. And when the violence broke out in December of 2013, despite all the boundaries between them, they used the phones to warn each other and to warn each other of where the attacks were and where they would take place. So they created their own early warning system amongst them. But the second part of that is perhaps the more important part. When we started working in this project and bringing the technology angle, what the kids, they didn't want the phones just for the sake of having a phone. They wanted to learn vocational skills and learn how they could get into technology, because in order to not become a child soldier, they needed to have a way to get a job.